Hello and welcome to the Pinkbike podcast. My name is Henry and I'm joined by Dario and Kaz to talk all things mountain biking, answer some of your questions and do some show and tells. Dario, you've had a review go live on the website this morning as we record for the... Hey, is it Haro or Haro? Please help me.
I think on this side of the ocean it's Haro, but I think you'd be forgiven on your side for Haro.
Okay. The ocean, is that... Are we talking from where I'm from or like some big old river?
No, not the small border crossing.
Yeah.
Yes, I have a review up on the website of the Haro Greer. It's a 160, 170 enduro bike. Haro, long, storied past, but kind of a mixed history with mountain bikes, and they're making I'd say a pretty solid effort to revitalize that lineup, and this is maybe like the flagship bike in that lineup. You know, long travel, fairly aggressive enduro bike. One of those bikes that like does all the things but doesn't necessarily have one standout feature that seems like a USP, but it is like it's a good bike.
We can talk about the weight. It's only 40
it is
pounds.
40 pounds.
Yeah. Well.
Yeah, I definitely kind of ate my hat on this one where, you know, I'm all
That's
about...
why you're not wearing it. Kaz and I didn't.
Right, exactly. Yeah, I don't have it anymore. I had to eat it. Like, I think some bikes mask weight better than others. The Greer doesn't mask its weight. You know, and that's maybe like where the weight is coming from, but I've ridden other bikes with like the same wheel set and the same tires and haven't found them to be quite as beefy feeling.
Which is interesting, isn't it? Because there are some bikes that are heavy, but once you get them up to a canter, they kind of hold their own. But similarly, do you know what bike I would say reminded me of that was maybe not in weight, but in just it never felt like it really carried momentum, was like that Meta SX we had on field test, had that kind of notch in the beginning of its stroke. And it just sort of undermined how light-footed the bike felt. Would you say it's something similar with the Haro?
Yeah, it's just like it's not in a rush. I don't know. It gets you everywhere. Even on the descents, I feel like it takes a moment for it to get up to speed. And part of that is like the nature of the suspension on it. It's like pretty low leverage bike that feels like it's doing more, at least for someone my weight, pardon me, at speed. I liked the characteristic of it when you're going as fast as you can, but on slower speed stuff, anything like awkward or overly technical, it starts to feel a bit awkward. I don't know. Like it just doesn't, I never got it into a place where I was like happy with the performance everywhere. I kind of had to make concessions to get it to work in different situations.
Kaz, looking through the comments, and some of our audience have pointed out the thing that comes to my mind is, okay, so say you make your piece with the 40-pound weight. Okay. What I think is probably harder, at least to my mind, is on the larger XL bikes, it's still got a comparatively short rear end. You know, we're talking a 510 reach, I think. Would that be right for the XL?
Yeah, it's a 510 in the XL. The one I tested was 485.
I don't know, it just feels like, you know, can you ever have a bike that... So with the 435 rear end, I think people will think of, you know, whatever they think about bikes, but it might be that it's going to be more nimble, more fun, poppier. Is that not in a direct contradiction with the fact that this bike weighs 40 pounds? Can you ever get a bike that's 40 pounds and poppy with a 510 reach?
Yeah, I mean, I'd say they kind of played it safe with this bike. It looks nice, like the lines and things look nice, but they didn't step outside the box as far as geometry or even go into what we're seeing more like the proportional sizing for chainstays. They really didn't do anything that we haven't seen before. You know, some people do like short chainstays, even taller riders. So I think that they have an option, but yeah, I would agree. Like I've ridden bikes with a long reach and like with these same proportions, and it would be nice a little bit longer. You can still make a nimble bike with longer chainstays, and you just get like,
fake news, guys. Fake news.
I know,
everyone
right?
knows as soon as chainstays.
Yeah,
I'm just.
No. I mean, that's what you'd think, but like even recently, I've been riding a bike that it's not out yet, but it still has like almost 450 mil chainstays, but the whole bike feels so balanced, and I've been super impressed with how I can maneuver it. It doesn't ever feel long, and it's just because all the geometry numbers work well together. So yeah, I would, for this bike, it would have been cool if they did something a little bit out of the ordinary, but hopefully this is maybe the start of things for them, and their next bikes go a little bit more.
Yeah, I kind of alluded to that. I think, there's a rumor of them making like more models down the line. So I'd be curious to see what those look like. And with this, I think the low leverage rate on the that is exerted on the shock kind of plays against the short chain stays to a degree, where I think part of the association people have with short rear end bikes is like an ability to like preload and kind of pop it around. But because the suspension takes more work to get into travel, it kind of counteracts that ability to a degree, but also then kind of gives it a bit more of that stability at speed, so it's not chopping around quite as much. So do
you think, so you could just help to explain to the listener about that relationship, because less leverage on the shock, but in some ways you think, can you just explain that thinking a bit more?
Yeah, I mean, principally it's just the idea of, the linkage of a bicycle is allowing you to exert some amount of force on the shock, and that shock is suspending you. So the leverage rate of a bike is it's ratio versus rate. Ratio is a singular thing at one point in travel. Rate is throughout the whole range of travel, but basically it's just how much advantage you have over that shock at a given point or throughout the entire travel. So this bike gives you less advantage, it put simply, but that is not a bad thing. I want to make it clear that, like, for a heavier rider or for people who like a certain feel, like call it maybe like a more consistent platform throughout travel, that can be a beneficial thing. And then for heavier riders, you're able to hit sag without having to go too extreme in shock pressure, which is a useful thing. I mean, for some people, it's critical. Like, you look at like Raw has two different links for the Madonna, so that there's like a heavier rider link and a lighter rider link to that same end.
It's almost as if different people ride bikes, and we're not all just a 170 pound, 180 centimeter, just to mix up metric and imperial nicely. Yeah. It's yeah. Well, hey, it goes on. Kaz, what would your show and tell be this week?
Yeah, mine, I can't really talk about most of the things I've been riding lately, but I wanted to talk about an item that just showed up on the homepage today. It's the 9.8's new inverse pedal system. And inverse, of course, has no vowels. Well, it has one vowel, but lowercase I NVRS system. And so this is a pedal system, but the pedals are soft and your shoes are sharp. So you have pins that mount onto your shoes, and the pedal basically has almost looks like a 510 circles on it. So the pins on your shoe are what are poking into the pedal. That's a lot of P's.
You are stabbing the pedal instead of the pedal stabbing you.
And whatever else you'd like to stab. So like someone mentioned in the comments, and it was the first thing I thought was hardwood floors. Like, how many times you go out to go ride and you go run back in your house because you forgot your water bottle or something.
Yeah.
And
well, I proofed the piece, and the guy in the video even mentioned, he was like, make sure that you don't wear these inside a house. Like, as if it's not an obvious trait, but
just destroying gas station floors. Like, as you walk in to get your snacks, just like...
Yeah, well, like, I mean, how many people stop at like a coffee shop on their way to ride, or have like a car with fabric floors that would get, I don't know. There's a lot of friction points, no pun intended, with this idea that seem.
I wonder if they make magnesium pins. It's interesting to hear. Like magnesium pins on your shoes, and you could be on the road and put your feet on the ground, and like sparks would come out. That'd be cool.
Yeah,
well, it's interesting to hear the word "stab" in bike design. I've never seen any bike design go down the Lady Macbeth route before. You know what I mean? That's kind of cool.
Well, the Kona stab.
Well, Kona had that wrapped.
Of course,
but
yeah. But other than that,
I have one of those in my basement.
Yeah.
Oh, nice. So
yeah,
can you replace the like rubber sheath? So what's the then it's. Your shoes last longer, your pedals last longer.
They are cheaper. Like, they're $69 pedals, and the idea is that you can replace that rubber sheath for very little. I don't know if they have a price on that yet, but in theory, I think they kind of mentioned that this is primarily for fat biking and like for winter riding. So you might benefit from having crampons anyway, or you want to put studs in like a winter boot. And in that case, I think it is like a novel idea.
Yeah.
I just can't foresee riding like most conditioned places and deciding that this would be a
It works with sandals though too. They showed some flip flops.
Yeah, you can do studded flip flops.
Yeah, a studded flip flop is kind of appealing too. We do.
But
We
those
are working
studs
on getting.
going into the boot are long. You wouldn't want that to go too much into your flip flops.
No, it might go the other way. Yeah, you have to put like a plate in your flip flop. So we are working on getting some in because they're interesting. But yeah, I'm with Dario. I think they'd be good for. I can see them like fat biking, that type of stuff. You have some heavy, chunky boots already, and then you could just cruise around.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
I
But
mean,
every other application, not as much to me. But
I went for a ride this week. It's super cold here right now, and I went for a ride where a little kind of adventuring and topped out on this bald hill that had been just windblown ice for the past week. And I was unable to get across this clear cut without just crawling on my hands and knees. So I think these would have been useful in that circumstance. But
they'd be good for slippery logs.
Nice. That too.
But yeah, we'll see. They're interesting. I thought it was April Fool's joke at first, but it appears that they're real.
Yeah.
As far as I can tell, it seems that they're real. So we'll see if they show up. And
yeah.
get,
It's interesting. Sometimes there have been novel takes in pedals, magnetic pedals. I tried them, Matt Beer reviewed them. I don't think either of us really clicked, if you'll excuse the pun. But it just feels, I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, normal
pedals is something people are pretty entrenched with.
Yeah. So we'll see.
It has been incredibly cold and dry here. I mean, some of the best winter riding we've had in a while.
Incredible.
It also seems to be maybe the most. I basically am a nerd and cycle with not just a Garmin, but what is basically, that computer that beat was the first one to beat the chess player.
Yeah,
Blue Ocean,
Deep
whatever.
Blue,
Blue
or
Horizon, Deep Blue. Yeah, I've got that strapped to my handlebars. This thing's huge.
It's like everything.
It's like an IBM server. Yeah, and it got yosted off, and I had to just scramble up the trail to go get it. And walking down, only then did I realize it is so. It's not much grip when you ride, but when you actually walk the trail and have a look, it's just like marble on hardpack. It is probably the fastest, craziest conditions you could ever ride a mountain bike on.
I'm pretty into it. Yeah.
It's sweet. You just can't fall because the ground is so hard now. Like normally we're spoiled because our ground is kind of soft, but right now falling is out of the question. But the actual conditions in some spots are so good. It's like crazy hoarfrost traction, and it's pretty cool.
Yeah, although it is one of those things where you have like a pristine ride. You're coming to the end of the ride clean, everything's great, and then you do ride through a bit of open.
Yeah, you get like one patch of freeze thaw.
The mushiest sticks. Yeah. And it's frozen. Yeah, so it's for winter. It's excellent. If it was springtime, it's not as excellent, but it's pretty fun though.
Yeah, I'm surprised it's cold. Me and Toblerone are going to have to go jumper shopping this afternoon because he's outgrown his last one. This boy, he's grown at a rate of knots, and now he looks kind of ridiculous in this small jumper. He's chunky.
Yeah, you're trying to pork him up, right? Wasn't that the whole?
Yeah.
We should remind people that Toblerone is Henry's dog, not his actual child.
Toby, hey boy.
Yeah.
I'm be right back. This is for the visual. Entertain yourselves.
Toby. Well, I don't have a dog.
I don't have a dog either.
I do have.
But Henry's going to have a calendar out. He's working on different outfits for every month. So next year,
it's going to be one of our new 2025 Pinkbike merch pieces is Henry's dog calendar. He looks great, Henry.
Yeah, he looks like an Ewok.
Look at this. He's just muscle.
For the audio listeners, this is a fluffy, was it a Shih Tzu?
Shih Tzu, yeah.
Shih Tzu.
Just very, very strong boy.
Yeah. He's quite nice. Very cute.
Toby, go choose some more electric cables. My show and tell is maybe more of a Okay, so I want to paint you a word picture, and I want you to give me advice. I'm charging along on a £15 cross-country bike. I'm going so much faster up the fire road climbs than everyone else on their Sunday ride on their £40 435 rear-end enduro bikes. Would it be expected? I think, as that rider, I should just give someone on your left.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I think there's this thing, when you go through business class to go to your shit seats at the back of the plane, and the people in business class are almost embarrassed at how good they've got it.
I love it. I always make eye contact.
Yeah. I think this is the same thing where people on e-bikes are sometimes embarrassed to like acknowledge how much faster they're going. And like, I just got razzed so many times going up the fire road, just like people either side, and e-bikes are so quiet now. And basically like, I heard voices on the back left. So I pulled to the right, and there was this silent e-bike and turbo on the right, which are like clipped handlebars with. I said some effing and jeffing, more the situation, which I don't think came across. I was like, fucking e-bikes, man, like expecting someone to laugh, and then no one laughed. And I was like, oh no. But it's one of those things where it's like, just we're all, I don't know, I think biking's super cool. It's great. More people that do it, the better it gets. And the more people kind of basically give me the job and the lifestyle that I love of being interested in it.
Yeah.
And just say hello, you're welcome. Just say you're in the club now. Just say hello.
It's really easy to just like make a noise at the very least. It doesn't even have to be a sentence. Just be like, hey, like give a little something. I think on the fire roads, it's like, I don't know, it all works a bit better, but in areas that are fed by like a single climb trail, I'm thinking of one place in Central California in above all else, but like it is a problem if you do not say something, and it just increases tensions and makes everybody angry, and it's no fun.
Well, there's a trail here called 50 Shades of Green, which is our single track climb through Alice Lake.
Yeah.
And about a week or two ago, this guy said on your left. So I was like, okay, cool. He's going to wait until there's a safe moment to pass, because it was there's one part that's quite narrow. Oh no, it was there and then,
like
baby.
Blowing past
it was there and then. I was there just like, come on, like,
yeah.
You're just going to give everyone a bad rap, like,
yeah. You just have to be patient, you know what I mean? And nice. And,
it's crazy to me.
Yeah, it's weird. The weird, I do think that like the not saying hello or on your left or like the no acknowledgement is so strange sometimes. It happens. I mean, I see it happen with hikers a lot too, where you kind of like trying to be super nice, like, hey, have a good day. And they just like don't say any words. It's really strange. It's like people are mute, and it makes me feel like I'm invisible. And I get in my head a lot when I'm riding. I'm like, I don't think that people, it just makes it like
you just go into a bank trying to help yourself.
I'm like, can they see me? I don't think they can see me. Yeah, because like all day, no one says any words. I say like hello, and like I'm not Mr. Social when I'm out there, but I do at least try to be like, hey, like, or just try to be like kind of nice to get some sort of like human reaction. But it's pretty strange. I think I'll make a blanket statement on the whole, like we're all not good at socializing these days, and it gets even weirder out in the trails.
It's true. Yeah, it seems like a subtle thing, but making any effort to humanize random people that you see, I think has like a pretty massive knock-on effect on the quality of life and on just the state of things. Like it helps a lot to just say hi.
Yeah, I think just being friendly is the way to do it. But especially if you're on an e-bike though, like it's very, very easy to climb hills on an e-bike. So just, relax and don't put pressure on if you're tailgating someone and you're on an e-bike, like don't. That's the worst.
Yeah, it's
like it's even more annoying than if you're tailgating in a car, which I hate also. But yeah, just be normal out there.
I'm gonna start brake tapping people. I do it in the car, so I might as well do it on trails. Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you think when e-bikes really started getting momentum, probably 5 or so years ago, there was great talk of the exciting things that was going to allow people to climb and how much fun they were to climb tech trails, which actually I think is a really interesting sort of avenue for them to go down. It doesn't seem like that's been embraced so much by the community at large. Do you think that that's going to come one day where we do end up with like the cool e-bike climb trail and you can just about crawl up if you can?
I think it has more to do with rider level. And if you're, a beginner, intermediate rider on an e-bike, you're not going to be seeking out climbs that are super hard just because you're still trying to figure out how to, control the bike in general. Around here, I'd say like those of us that have been riding regular bikes and e-bikes for a while, we do, we've got some pretty gnarly climbs incorporated into our routes, but I mean, it turns out descending is fun on everything. So I think descending is always going to win out, but I think there's something to be said that it is fun how, gnarly of a trail you can go up, but then there's also the thing, you can't just go up a downhill trail. Like, even though you could, you're not going to go up 19th hole or something.
Fake news again.
Yeah.
My like the extent to which I have engaged with that beyond just like the occasional tech climb is like we have some woods moto areas around here, and I'll like occasionally go out there and try to climb some moto climbs just to remember that e-bikes are not motorcycles and that you can't really do it. I mean, you can try and some of them do work, but it's a nice humbling experience. But
I do like going up stupid stuff. Like I have a loop that has a stupid finish that just goes straight up a rut that is from, I don't know what made the rut originally, but it wasn't bikes, but to make it up to the top feels cool, but you would never, ever be able to get up it on a regular bike. Like it'd be impossible. Even if you're doping for years, you couldn't do it. So there's something to that, but I think that, most of what we're seeing, people aren't really as actively seeking out those super hard climbs. Like they are, but not like it was promised or supposed in the very beginning, I think.
Well, shall we get into some listener questions? I'll probably do it wrong. Like last week, they came in so loud. So I'm going to learn my lesson. And we'll give this one a whirl.
So I think we all know the bike industry is doing really bad right now. And talking to a lot of bike shop owners and stuff, they seem like they're really going through it and barely scraping by. So I'm wondering what you guys think the bike industry needs to do in the next 5 to 10 years to become like normal, successful-ish, doing all right.
Well, I think this is an interesting thing.
We're going to solve it right here, guys.
Well, I think let's ease up. Let's temper those expectations right from the off. But also, I think some companies are really struggling, which you hear about. But I think that, like in anything, everything has its up and down. I think that it just depends. Different parts of the industry have hurt at different times. There have been some sort of, there has been some tumultuous sort of things coming out the last couple of months with sort of big brands running into trouble, most notably Rocky in GT. But, and just to preface what I'm interested for what you guys have to say, I would say that in at least one of those instances, this isn't a brand that has been on the up and up and up, carving its place, getting bigger and bigger for years. It's maybe been more, it's been bought, it's been moved on, it's had this, it's had other brands in its ownership portfolio that it's got like competing with, and it's being positioned sort of in mind of. So I think I wouldn't read everything just off like sort of the anecdotal side of things.
Mm-hmm.
That said, what do we think would like to see, we could see in the next 5-10 years, just to make this a bit more sustainable, perhaps?
Don't think we will. Like the mountain biking industry is silly and it always goes in cycles. And this one seems to be a bit worse than others, but we've seen it before. And plus it ends up being so tied into economic factors of like the world at large. So who knows what happens with that? Like this obviously is still like a hangover from COVID pandemic, ordering too many things. You get stuck with a lot. The demand drops out. So it's a whole, perfect storm that from like the hindsight is 2020 thing. When you look back, you're like, oh yeah, why did they all do this? But then at the time, I don't think people knew how quick demand would drop. But I'd say almost 5 to 10 years is too far to look down the road. Like I think for a lot of companies, they're either going to figure it out in the next year or two, or they're not. I think we're closer to the point of where things start to stabilize for them, where they can get their inventory under control and kind of like get back on the normal product release cycle. Like a lot of companies have just been in that holding pattern, trying to sell their old stock, which is great for consumers right now because you can get really good deals. But we're still like trying to figure out the inventory management, but they're starting to get under control. And if they don't, well, we are starting to see, bankruptcy filings and that type of stuff.
Mm-hmm. I see it as like a matter of reducing complexity to a degree as well. Like whether that's actionable advice or not. I mean, and no one's listening to me for advice, but like you look at your average mountain bike company, they have 9 versions of every bike, and each of those incurs a ton of costs and credit and all of these like complicated supply chains for each individual thing, for tires, for spokes, for grips, for stems. It's like each SKU you add complicates things exponentially. And I think if you can reduce that, it just becomes easier to play it safe, and I think that that's maybe the unfortunate game that people have to do, is just like be more cautious with how you develop things. And mountain biking, I think generally a lot of the like entries into the market are quite aspirational. You're like, oh cool, I'm passionate about this thing, I want to make whatever, a new stem or a new pedal, some smaller thing, and that's like low enough lift that you can kind of jump into it. But even those have supply chain things to think about. But then you think about an entire bicycle, like assuming we're talking about bike companies here, it just gets mired in all the different people you have to rely on for each individual thing. So simplicity definitely is the friend, in my eyes at least.
Well, I mean, I think that's a great point. Do you think that with that in mind, and how personal a mountain bike is, and how much, I know that we get frustrated that, by standards and things not always transferring, but most mountain bikers, when they get a new bike, probably look at their current bike and think, oh, but I'd take this part over and this part's pretty good. Is it not strange we don't see more like rolling chassis style things where
I'm shocked we don't.
Yeah.
You
can get basically a frame, suspension, maybe the rims or whatever.
I mean, it's such, I think, but you're forgetting of who's buying mountain bikes. I think, the Pinkbike audience wants those, and that's cool. And like a lot of people say they want frame only, and it's that badge of honor. Like, I built this up from the frame only, and I get it because then you picked each part and you made your own thing. But I'd say the vast majority of consumers, they just want to go in, buy a mountain bike, go mountain biking once in a while and be done with it. Like, they're not, we're speaking because we're all super addicted to it and we just think about mountain bikes all the time. And I'd assume most of the people listening to this, they're in that same boat. And so the rolling chassis makes sense, but also from a company standpoint, like stocking that and trying to help out the consumer. I think most people want that Amazon method where you just go click basket at your door. That's it. So I think it's a little harder to pull off, but I do like the concept. I know like the companies that do it, it makes sense to me. We're like, oh, you get most of it and you just pick or even the a la carte model can be cool too, where you do get more options, like where you can go to their website and like pick the tires that you want. Pick stuff.
The problem with the a la carte menu is the unbelievably complex websites, which for some reason, mountain biking websites with any level of customization are just
if I could fix one thing, if we could start, that's the answer. We just fix the websites of most bike companies across the board, like from small to large. Most of them don't have it figured out. If you can make it just basic, like so I can understand it, it would be nice.
I will say, kudos where due. I'm reviewing the new propane Spindrift, and because they have some stock builds, but primarily they're pushing the a la carte method, and so that's how I built up this review bike. And their process is quite easy, and I just went through it as a consumer. So it can be done well. I think from like a business standpoint, I'm always curious how the a la carte thing works. Like, do they have a big enough warehouse to stock all the parts, or are they ordering from like some third-party dealer for that bevy of parts? I've always been curious how that operates, but assuming you can make that work, it seems like a pretty solid method.
I think from what I remember, it was probably about 10, 15 years ago, Focus at the time were massively into road bikes. They'd started mountain bikes, but not to the same level they have now. And they basically would order frames in such huge quantity, but not getting them, as far as I remember, and I might be wrong on this, but they'd order huge quantities of frames and not get them painted in Asia. Or they do the paint at like the last minute, because then they weren't confined with committing to model year straight away, where if they had blank frames, they could then, and also that was quite like a novel, interesting approach, because the model year is another thing that seems, sometimes unhelpful at best.
I think the good news, I don't know if we know we're not going to answer this caller's question, but I think the good news is for consumers right now, it's a pretty great time to be a mountain biker as far as like parts are available. I haven't had trouble finding any parts recently, like brake pads and little things that were missing for a while. Those are, at least from my end, they seem really easy to get, and prices are pretty good for the most part too, especially if you're buying like a bike from 2024. Those are all on sale and they still have them in stock. Like, it is bad for the companies, but for a mountain biker, it's pretty sweet. Prices are going down to a more reasonable level. I don't think it's going to stay like that, but maybe by the time we're out of all this, prices aren't as crazy either, where they get back to being like normal-ish. But yeah, I don't know.
There's like a theory, I think, in running shoes where they have to make a $300 running shoe because people will buy it. They don't have like the shoes say stop getting better at $100. Or maybe that's wrong, but you know what I mean? But the reason they make more is because people will buy them. Is that the same in mountain biking?
Yes.
Yeah, you want to have your flagship thing. How many they make and how many they sell, who knows? But if you are a company, like you're a company trying to make money, and if you can have this, we used to call it the pig in the window.
Kaz, no, that is a lie. Mountain biking industry is not here for profit, money, or anything else. It is there as a philanthropic, philanthropic to make people happy. And if we feed ourselves, that's just about okay.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, we used to just call it the pig in the window. You put the S-Works bike in the front window of the shop and someone comes in like, ooh, look at that. How much is it? Oh, it's 15 grand. Oh, what's this one? Oh, that's only 3 grand. Okay. Like, it is it's sales and marketing and that type of stuff. But like that's not the bread and butter bike. They're not just going like selling tons and tons of those. It's kind of like their limited edition. Like, look at this aspirational, crazy thing we made.
I've always thought that's such a specialize with the S-Works, because at least then you're not spending, say, $15,000, whatever crazy figure, on something that has even the same. I mean, how different a lot of those frames are. Maybe they have a different link. Maybe they use a different blend of carbon fiber, etc., etc. I don't know. But I think for the consumer, buying a really expensive bike, they're like, but we're not just getting the same bike that's the entry level one, but for £5,000 more, whatever, we're basically getting some parts which, if you add them all up, cost £3,000 extra.
Yeah. I think like with the S-Works model, at least it is a different frame, but you see other brands do a similar price markup for an actually identical frame, and there isn't even the like paint job or whatever that makes you feel like it's some super special thing, and it's just astronomically more expensive. I think that's where I start to get a little queasy, but it seems like the market bears it. I mean, those bikes do sell, and whether it's for the marketing clout or for actual performance reasons, hard to say, but they continue to crop up.
Probably not that hard to say.
Yeah, I think it's for marketing. Like, I mean, yeah, like the
but people, I don't know, man. But there are dudes who will buy a $15,000 bike and be like, "This is what I need,"
Well, yeah, like, but that's still marketing. That's not performance.
Sure, but like it's perceived by the consumer as performance.
Yeah,
and I think that's the.
Yeah. Well, that's I think the best
the desired effect.
Performance is the placebo effect. It is if it's effective and you don't have to change anything about like who you are, why you do, what I mean, and you just feel like it's better.
Mm-hmm.
It's different, obviously, for good reasons. But
this brings up a pet peeve of mine that I have, though. I don't like when companies do the two different carbon frame levels. Like Santa Cruz does C and CC, Yeti does carbon and
Turk,
medium carbon or something. Like
no, it's Turk.
It's Turk, and then not. They just don't.
Not Turk.
Like JD's best friend out of Scrubs.
Oh yeah,
what?
Right? Yeah, it was. I haven't watched Scrubs in a long time, but you're right.
I've never seen Scrubs.
It's watch it on a plane sometime.
That's why it's the blue. It makes sense as Scrubs.
Yeah. But yeah, I just don't understand why you would just make one good frame and then forget charging people the extra. No one can tell the difference, and they even say the stiffness is the same. It just weighs more, and you're like, well, just like.
But this one's got 80% less voids.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Like, so why not just give me the good one at the price? I don't want to know there's a different. And even, I mean, I thought it was funny how Santa Cruz had the one you could pay less and get the internal cable routing for a derailleur, like the
which I would imagine is a more expensive manufacturing process,
but it uses a different carbon fiber layup,
right,
supposedly. So I have a Bronson now, and I have the one that I can run a cable actuated derailleur, but it's the less expensive one. But somehow I'm on one that weighs more than the other. It just hurts my brain. Just make one frame and make it really good and sell that.
I mean, I don't know. I don't mind there being a lighter frame option, but
I do.
Really?
Yeah. Why not just make one? I mean, two molds of the same, or you have the same mold, but you're like,
to this listener's question, it is like a valid point that you're making, that like if you simplified this product lineup and only had one frame option, you would be less extended as a business.
How is it worth the extra $500 or whatever it costs for that frame? There's no way anyone's telling the difference.
I mean, if you care about weight, sometimes 300 grams or whatever. Sometimes
you can't tell it on the trail though.
Probably not, but
yeah, I think it's
Kaz,
silly.
can you stop giving sensible consumer advice? It makes me sick.
Yes, I'm sorry.
I'm here just playing devil's advocate. I can't imagine that I'd be springing for the fancier thing necessarily. Yeah.
But like it just annoys, because sometimes you have to buy the crappy build kit because they put the lower price build kits on the less expensive frames, but you might want the fancy build kit on the less expensive frame. I don't know. It all just seems
mountain bikers just want good suspension and brakes.
Yeah, that's all I need.
And then but it's frustrating when that's the thing. I wish each brand did a thing where they said, "Hey, listen, let's level with you. A lot of this is marketing nonsense, but this is the one no nonsense model between friends. This is the no nonsense one. Just get this one for all of our the Pinkbike core audience, the people that are into the reviews."
Well, a lot of brands will present it to us as that. They're like, "Oh yeah, this is the shop rat bike," and I think those are cool. But oftentimes it is like the funky build. It's like mixed wheels where it shouldn't be, and like weirdly powerful brakes or like funny suspension. It's always like some kind of there's like an angle, but I like those. I think those are fun bikes.
That's like how the Evo series of like Specialized started. Like the Stump Jumper Evo was like what we were already all doing. So I like when they acknowledge that. But yeah, I don't know where my point was.
Norco did it with the optic this year or last year, where it was like the mixed wheel optic with big brakes and like super burly tires and wheels, and it's just entirely not silly. What that bike is meant to be. But I think it's sick. Like I'm cool with it.
I went past a group of riders the other day, didn't say hello, thank you very much, and
you didn't or they didn't.
I didn't. I was at no, of course I did. And we had a chat anyway. I think there were probably 5 of them, and 4 of them were on those sites. A very like sort of PNWE trail bike, like, you know. I thought, and honestly, I never, you know, obviously Kaz, you reviewed one. I think
the
some of the colours
were talking about the older one.
Yeah, the newer one with the high pivot.
Yeah.
Yeah, and some of the colours a bit, but I think they actually look like a real like.
I like that bike.
That style of bike, and like a hard out. Well, I can't speak to value, obviously. So I've got this dog chewing off my arm and being attacked, maimed by a fierce predator in the house. Toby, give us a fucking break. Right, next question.
Hey, Pinkbike, what is your opinion on Freeride bikes missing from the market? And you have these situations where Trek is making one-off bikes for branded and email, and then riders are having to basically customize their bikes, like Tom Eistedt and Dan Paley on Giant, or even Eddie Reynolds on Kona, to make the bike kind of work for them. Is there something missing in the current market for Freeride, or is that part and parcel for the culture of Freeride that you actually hack away at your bike and make it your own, even though, you know, if you ask these companies directly if they could do that, they would probably say, no, we don't recommend you do that.
Well, I think with, you know, you mentioned the Brandon Semenuk thing there. They do the same thing for their World Cup races as well. Mm-hmm. You know, they sometimes do ride the stock session, but a lot of them will be on prototype tubing or a different dimension in some way, some kind of different frame characteristic. But it is weird though. I mean, it felt like there was a time, I know we spoke about this before, where the 180mm single crown bike was a bad thing. Mm-hmm. It disappeared, and then coincidentally the enduro bike came about and everyone decided it was a great thing, and then it kind of got very slack and moved away. But actually some of these modern enduro bikes are quite a bit steeper, lots of travel, you know, not necessarily like full race spec. I don't know, do you think the Freeride bike is, even for a company's point of view in terms of like viability, do you think it is viable?
Not real. I think it's funny, the definition of Freeride, because I'm old. I don't get confused, but like when I think Freeride, I think,
are you getting confused, Kaz?
Yeah, I'm old and senile. No, but like in my mind, I think Freeride. I think like hucking off weird drops and riding weird stuff in the woods. Where this guy he's cocking a little bit, which to me is more like slope style.
Yeah,
and I think the market for a slope style bike is even smaller than a Freeride bike, because like a Freeride bike, you can use that as your park bike. That's your kind of goof around in the woods thing. It's a mini downhill bike for some people. But like an actual slope style, a bike that you need to modify to be able to do tail whips and have it optimized for flipping and spinning and things is different. And the market for that is so small that I think that's why we've always seen these riders kind of customize their own bikes. And
yeah,
I think so. Yeah.
I mean, also the examples he cited are companies that maybe don't have a bike in their lineup that suits those riders. You know, like Trek has the Slash, but that's definitely more of a race bike than it is like do tricks on weird terrain bike. You know, it's I can imagine why your Brandon Semenuks of the world, all of them would want the Sesh, I think they called that thing, like you know, pretty unique bike for certain circumstances. But you look at most of his videos, he's just riding a stock Slash or like a Ticket or something like that.
Well, there was the previous version Sesh, which I think they still is now like the Session Park or something, and that's the thing that Cade and stuff ride.
Yeah,
there was a bike years ago, Kaz, that I thought was super cool. I think it was the Scratch, which was 180mm, 26-inch front and back. What happened to that? Because it was cool. Because it feels like the Trek range, because it had the Remedy, which was like the trail bike to have, and then it got bigger and it got smaller, and then the Slash came in, then it kind of disappeared, and I don't know.
Yeah,
but there was the Scratch as well, which was super cool.
Yeah, that's when I think there was the Enduro. That's when there was a few different Enduro bikes too from Specialized. There was like the Enduro SX, and then there was the Enduro I'm blanking on it too, but they had a 180 mil enduro also. That was like their Freeride bike. I reviewed that. I mean, it was 10, 11 years ago now. But yeah, I think it kind of just it goes with what people want. So if I was a company, I would go more with like the bike park bike that can be modified into how you want it. But yeah, it's hard to say what, I think these riders are finding. I think the demands of the riders are so different these days. Like even a bike that you're going to use for Rampage is going to be different than what you use for Crankworks, or it's just such a specialty niche that I don't think the demand is there to really have like your whole line of slopestyle bikes. If you're a company, you just have one that you can kind of adapt to make it work.
Yeah.
Do you think there's any credence to the idea that the better a bike is for racing, the worse it is for freeride? For instance, when on our downhill field test last year, the bikes that we kind of loved thrashing on tech, flat out trails, hugged to the ground, they had loads of grip, a bit of compliance, not necessarily the same thing that we'd want when we were even cruising laps like the jump lines in the park.
Yeah, I think that's true. I mean, you're gonna, a lot of them are running 26-inch rear wheels, 27.5 front. They want short chain stays for spinning, higher bottom bracket, steeper head angle. They're all things that we would typically in a bike review would be like, this doesn't work, but we're also not trying to spin sevens on our typical bike review. So it is, yeah, it's such a specialty thing. They know what they want and they're going to make it. But I just don't think we'll see a company come out as like a free ride only company, just because again, the market is so small. I mean, we have Zinc bikes. So you can get your, Zinc Strine, but it's just a small little thing. It's cool to see I always like seeing what they do to adapt their bikes, like all the little crank stoppers we've seen over the years, so that when you kick it for a tail whip, the cranks don't spin. And those things are cool, but yeah, I just don't think it's.
I mean, to like that final point he made in the question of like, well, is this just part of the nature of freeride? I think that is part of it. Yeah. It's like part of the expression of that realm of mountain biking is having this unique bike that is suited to your style of riding and to your aesthetic. And I think that even if there is this perfect catalog bike, you'd probably still see people modifying it in some way just to make it suit that niche a little bit better.
That's what's cool about it. Look at Remy Morton. He doesn't have a chain. He's got
he's running like children's cranks with a 24-inch.
I love that stuff.
Yeah.
I was the other day, it came up in my like YouTube suggestions. It was like the Fest series highlight video from like 2017. And that felt like a really cool moment. That like the Royal Fest, whatever, with those huge jumps in Belgium. And it was just so, and everyone was kind of giving it a crack, and it felt like it was a very open as to what that style of rider was. I don't know. Where now it's maybe come back and it's kind of narrowed a bit again.
Yeah. Although if you I was looking at footage from the Magaza Fest that was this weekend in Queenstown.
So
and they've got a huge jump line there. That's, probably one of the biggest public-ish jump lines anywhere. But the number of riders, they did a train, and it looked like a 200-person train, which just that many people in one spot that can hit those jumps and style them up is really cool to watch. And I think the level, like the riding level in general, is so high right now that I don't even know. It's hard to comprehend sometimes. Like people can just hit massive jumps comfortably over and over and over again, and they're really good at it.
Yeah.
I don't know what my point was with that. But
are they in the room with us now, Kaz?
No. Like that's the thing. Like I'll hit something new and I'll be like, cool. And then I'll be like, oh, like there are people going so huge now and they're 12 years old. I'm like, well, all right. I'll still be proud of myself, but like no one else will be proud.
Well, that's it. Hey, should we ruffle into another question?
Yeah.
Hey guys, this is Kerry from Connecticut calling in, and I was wondering if I can pick your brain on this topic. I recently came across a modification where if you...
Okay, he goes on a bit of a tangent, but it gets good. So slightly long walk, but long drink as well. So it's worth it.
You swap out the main pivot bolt in your GX derailleur, or lower, an X, SX, whatever. For the one that comes on the X01 or XX1 derailleur, it takes out a lot of the side-to-side play and kind of just makes it feel a little bit more positive. I did the change on 2 bikes and can confirm it actually works pretty darn well. Since I probably are never going to buy an X01 or XTR derailleur or anything fancy like that, I think this is a pretty cool mod that kind of helps out a bit. Do you know of any other mods to close the gap to certain parts and maybe kind of let us I don't want to say cheapskates, but more frugally minded and slightly technical mountain bikers kind of have their fun too. What do you guys think? Thanks for the show. Much appreciated.
Cool.
Cheers.
I like
this
that.
This is a pretty good question. How do we get
What
get
I always
premium
did was cheapest derailleur, nice shifter, which isn't a mod really, but you get like you do get better performance out of less in that circumstance.
For how long though? Because do you ever find I don't know if it's the corrosion of the bushes in the cheap derailleur goes sooner, and then there isn't a spring tension to move down the cassette.
Yeah, you do have to find that sweet spot of like because you wouldn't want to do like an EXO shifter and then a G or a SX derailleur. Like that's
I will say, I'm talking pre SX existing.
Yeah.
So this would be like GX or NX equivalent.
With the
or
11 speed
SLX.
stuff was pretty good.
Yeah.
I think my one would be not the most expensive brakes, like SLX brakes, just the OE pads. I'm not someone that likes the cheap out on pads, but then good rotors. Getting the high, fancy cooling fins with the weird shaping and the colouring. For me, that's like
I go metallic pads though too.
Metallic pads,
Yeah.
Metallic pads, fancy rotors, but not the finned pads. Don't worry about them.
No fins. No, just metallic for
Yeah.
any brand.
I would always
anything.
buy like Magura rotors or Galfer rotors for Shimano brakes. I found that they were a bit more durable and consistent in terms of long-term use. Like the Ice Tech stuff seems to wear out or bend way more easily.
Do you find?
Yeah, it was just for me.
Yeah.
Like,
Rich, fair enough.
Other things, I mean, this is more of a like late stage life thing, but like with drivetrains, we now have some of those aftermarket, let's say like modification / fixing companies popping up, like Madrone components. So if you do have like a GX derailleur that's just clapped, you can send that in or buy the replacement parts and replace the pivots and stuff like that. As far as I know, he's only offering replacement parts for 12-speed kit, but potentially down the line that could trickle down to 11-speed. I think it's not a hack, but it is definitely a way to keep things alive and potentially upgrade. Like I haven't ridden his modded derailleurs yet, but from what I understand, the bushings he's using are a little bit tighter tolerance, so potentially longer life. That's another one. Don't get the top end suspension. It's not a mod, but
let's try and focus on the modding aspect, because I think that is.
And that's a mod with suspension. Sorry, Henry, to cut you off. I was just thinking you can get different dampers. That's a mod. Like if you end up on your bike something that you could upgrade, you can get like a Grip 2 or Grip X2 damper or the Charger. That's kind of nice when companies have the new version. Make sure maybe read some reviews, ask some buddies if the new damper is actually worth it. But in some cases, that's a cool way to continue using the same product you had, but with ideally more adjustments or better performance.
Something that I find if you've got a set of brake levers and you're thinking, the next level up is where you get with the adjustment. It sounds a bit daft, but the diameter of grip, so where your hand starts in relation to the lever and how far back it sits, can kind of really open up that window or reduce that window. So if you want to have, if you feel like, some people like to run stuff really close to the bar, but also really punchy. And if you go to a bigger diameter grip, you can suddenly get that feeling in a way that is really hard to get on a skinny grip. Just playing with the relationship between reach and grip diameter. I'm not saying it's like super cheap, but next time you're trying some grips, if that's something you always wanted, you can just go to a different size and sort of get some of the adjustment back that perhaps you don't have if you're going for more of the entry level stuff.
And to like similar effect, learning how to bleed your brakes in a particular way can achieve similar things. Like you can get a different feel out of a brake if you bleed it in a specific way, just speaking broadly about it, but overfilling, underfilling, advancing pistons can change the way that a brake works pretty fundamentally. Not always for better, but sometimes you can achieve a feel that you want, even if it's a not very adjustable lever.
In terms of when we talk about, to put this, we'll often talk about suspension feel. How much do you think you can do with just tokens? How wide is that window?
Wider than people give it credit for. I think a lot of people don't play with it, and it matters. Like you fundamentally change the way a bike works on the extremes of that adjustment platform, and there's fidelity within that because it's not just one or none. I think it matters quite a bit, especially if you're a lighter or heavier rider. Like you can get distinct feel.
Something I used quite recently was a Cascade do an eyelet extender for DHX2s. And for people that want to go mixed wheel from a full 29 frame, it is a very cheap, effective way. I think it's like $50 or something for this like CNC piece. And I thought that was super cool. Like, because to some people, they'll be like, oh man, maybe I've got this, like, that race bike style of enduro bike, full 29er, XYZ. And you don't need to get a whole new bike. You can just get this one piece and do something really, really cool. Basically just offsets the BB height lost. So it really preserves the rest of the geometry.
And is less weird than doing offset bushings or anything like that, which is...
my angle grinder was having a little tickle on some offset bushes the other day, and it did some really pretty work, which I can't wait to show you. Because when you're finished with that spin drift, that's the bike I would like to borrow. Is it a large or an extra large?
Large.
Then that's when you can have my Spire to confirm that it's the best bike in the world. And I'll take that one off you because I really think I've cracked it this time.
I'm excited.
Carrying on, honing, dialing every night with the angle grinder in the file. Every night.
Shaving it down. Removing more material than you'd ever believe.
Honestly, I've gone back to, because the link I took a lot of material away from is now, I put
in the garbage.
A good link on. Yeah. I mean, It's not in the garbage. It's somewhere else on
the mantle.
But that's not the point.
Oh, I can't believe I forgot the most important performance enhancer. You can buy chemical grade lye at the hardware store and mix it with a bit of water, and you can strip the anodization off absolutely any bike part you want. And that is that's a hack for this guy for this question.
It's 10% weaker, 5% cooler looking.
Yeah, and it will oxidize and start looking cloudy instantly. So you've got that going for you.
Well, that's nice. That's something to look forward to. Hey, we've got one more question. It's about mountain bike suspension. So you already know what I'm going to say.
It's not about relationship
It was
advice.
my first voicemail since my mom was late to pick me up from soccer practice in 2007. I've been riding for about 5 years, but only in the last couple seasons, as I've really started to progress, have I begun to think about how suspension settings affect the feel of your ride. When you guys talk about enduro bikes, you always say things like, I know how to get this fork or shock to feel exactly how I want it. So my question is, when each of you are setting up a bike, how far does your rebound and compression settings stray from the manufacturer's recommendation? And what type of feel are you going for that makes you prefer that? I've found that videos on bracketing tend to explain how suspension works and what the parts are doing rather than how it feels in plain terms. And I'm asking because I just bought a mixed wheel Dreadnought and it feels good, but not fully dialed yet. I'd previously demoed a 29er version of the Dreadnought in Moab, and I really liked how planted and stable it felt through chunk, even at high speeds. So far in the mixed wheeled version, my rear wheel has been kind of bouncing off its line in chunk. That could be just the nature of an MX bike, or it could be a rebounding compression thing. Not really sure. Thanks.
I wonder if the build kit was identical otherwise between the two.
The favorite argument of the Pinkbike crew.
No, it's not an argument. The way that he asked this is actually nice. There's no argument to it. It's just you're going to play with the settings on a repeatable track and figure out what feels best to you, what eliminates that variable that you're frustrated with. In his case, like what makes your rear wheel not deflect in a weird way.
What do you think that is, though?
I would start with the very basics. Just check sag and tire pressure, like the very, very basics, just to, like as your baseline. Because no matter what you do with the dials, if your sag is funky, then if you're running 20% sag, that's going to affect what it's doing. So maybe even if he's running say is running 30%, maybe just try 33 just to see if that gives it that initial bit. And then you can start turning the dials for rebound and compression. But that's where I would start.
Yeah, spring rate is, I always think, it might have been spoken before, but it's like, curling, spring rate's how hard you throw the rock, and the damping is how hard you scrub.
Mm-hmm.
If the rock throw is way out, it doesn't matter how much scrubbing you're going to do or not.
Did you have to come up with that analogy to get your Canadian citizenship?
Pretty much, hey, yeah. You can borrow it when you go for yours.
Yeah, I mean, I'm knocking at the border.
Getting a bit, it's a bit off track there. I'd say Kaz's advice is great. The thing that's really important to come back to is, getting a good baseline, and also, and that sounds a bit stupid, but in yourself, are you feeling comfortable that day? Are you prepared to be able to do something really consistently, or are you going to blame the bike if everything doesn't go immediately right?
Seriously though. Yeah. I mean, that's like part of the, sorry to jump in, like part of the like value in long-term tests for us is like you keep a bike long enough to get over whatever honeymoon period there is with it and start to just like analyze it as the thing that you're used to. And I think it's similar with buying a new bike. Like everything is different. Even if you demoed something and it felt good that day, you're going to have to then like get used to all the little factors and variables in it. And this does kind of sound like dodging the like, what click should you adjust? But
I'm going to come on to that, Dario. Don't worry about that.
Yeah.
I've got the guy covered.
I don't know. There's too many variables in a bike to just like hone in on one thing. Like, oh, you need faster rebound, or you need more low speed compression. There's a lot of things to factor. So
I've got a funny story from this past couple of weeks. So I stopped eating meat maybe 3 weeks ago, and this year I've just been loving pedaling and riding as much as ever. And I hit my head 2 weeks ago, and maybe it was 2 weeks ago. No, anyway, and suffering conditions of symptoms of concussion, and they were only getting worse. And basically, I stopped eating meat at the day before I had this concussion, right? And I'm feeling worse and worse over this past 2 weeks. I've started feeling really, really bad. And started like, what is going on? Because I felt like it was more than just a concussion, even though that explained why initially I felt so strange. I got fucking anemic.
Oh, are you serious?
Iron, there you go.
Yeah. I got fucking anemic.
Shit,
and then I was like,
I'm sorry.
But this is funny because I was blaming my bike. Like, I need to change the handlebar height.
Yeah. I'm so tired all the time. It must be
because I was like, but I was constantly, when you're riding your bike and you're not just feeling what happens, you're trying to interpret what happens, and it's going like the long way around the thought, and you're trying to react to it. And I was constantly like, why does my bike feel so bad?
It turns out eating fresh sliced pizza for breakfast, lunch, and dinner isn't the ticket to hell.
Well, that's the problem. That's what was, because the body is a machine. It needs grease and oil, and that's why fresh slice is so good for you. The problem is I cut out the fresh slice. That was the thing that was saving me.
They have vegetarian pizza there.
But it's so full of nutrients. I don't know how they pack it full of nutrients so much. But it's So eat fresh sliced pizza before any suspension testing. Is a really good point.
Yeah.
In terms of differing from manufacturer settings, I'm in the camp that the clicks are there to be used. Don't worry if you're on either end of the spectrum. If it feels good for you, don't worry about how many clicks, because even forks can vary from fork to fork, the exact same model, where the middle position doesn't always feel like the exact same. I'm in the camp, and I know that everyone's sick to death of hearing it, not least you, have the compression as closed, that the fork still has small bump and doesn't wash, and the rebound as fast as you can hold on to. That's my piece. That's what I aim for. Do you guys aim for anything particular? Kaz, I remember one time we spoke about how setting rebound on a shock, like off the second bounce almost. I believe that
I do that too.
It's a kind of decent way to start. If you do so you're basically just sitting on the bike and you kind of seat bounce it, reset your O-ring before you do it. And then if it's a, air shock, and then when you seat bounce it, you kind of want it to go through the travel, back up, and then halfway through. So kind of like, doesn't not use all the travel obviously, but you just kind of want to like cycle 1.5 times, and that's a way to kind of like check your rebound just as like a neutral starting point, and then you can go faster or slower depending on personal preference. But that's kind of what I'll do just as like an initial thing, and it seems like it works. It's like a really rudimentary seeming thing, but it works for me. But then after that, then like the parking lot test is kind of your first spot. I know people are like, parking lot tests don't work, and they they do work to get you in a place that you can feel safe off road. And then once you start riding on like actual trails, then you're going to tweak from there. But yeah, like for me, I want my suspension to be firm, but not so hard that it's knocking my hands off. I want to be able to use all the travel sometimes, but not all the time, like not every ride even, but like on a big hit, it should use most of the travel. But I don't want to bottom out at like the slightest bump. And then, yeah, rebound speed is kind of personal preference. Like I don't want to feel like I'm getting bounced around too much, but I also don't want to feel my bike is stuck on the ground. And I know this guy was asking about kind of what feel we're looking for. It really, like Henry said, it's going to depend on what feels good to you, but experiment, and the bracketing comes to that. Like figure out what happens when you turn your rebound pretty quick. Like obviously do it on a safe bit of trail. Don't find like the biggest jump ever or something crazy rough where you could hurt yourself, but figure out what is your rebound all the way open feel rideable to you? Like it might, but might not.
But also to that point, Kaz, I think that's I think it's worth in the experiment of trying to find out what's good is that the car park test is great for setting balance to make sure both shafts are going to a similar place and coming back at a similar speed. Similarly, when people do bracketing, they might say, oh, well, I'm just setting up the fork and I want to experiment with slow rebounds. So then they say close off the rebound. But actually, it can be really good if you've got a setup that is very neutral to you. Try adding 2 clicks front and rear and see what a slightly slower rebounding bike, but a balanced bike feels like, instead of suddenly having a really unbalanced bike for the sake of trying to find out, then realizing something you might quite like if it was universal, it being on only one end means that it feels horrible, and then you dismiss it. And you can just kind of go up and down through both things and settle on something that, I mean, you can just open up your rebound and close off your compression, it'll be mint. But if you want to go the long way around, spend a day, pissing about in the woods, and you can get something about right. Dario, any final thoughts on that one?
No, I mean, I think my approach is like usually bike to bike. I don't have like even with forks. So like, for instance, right now I have a few bikes that all have 170 millimeter Fox 38s on them. Those forks do not all have the same settings. I start at the same place and then I end up changing it a bit based on that given bike's characteristics. And so that is, I mean, you could see that as frustrating. You could see that as interesting. To me, it's just, there's always going to be a moment of figuring out what feels best on a given bike. When it's a whole new chassis, whole new everything, it's almost like the best case scenario, because you can kind of start at a neutral 0 and start playing with each different thing to get it feeling better and better and better. As you mentioned at the beginning, Henry, don't be afraid of going to the extreme of any adjustment. Just try that for a lap. Be careful, I guess. But
I'd actually still say start with the manufacturer's recommended settings, though. They
for sure, assuming they have that. Yeah.
I mean, everyone does. I can't think of one that doesn't have recommended settings. So. Like for a fork at least, or in SAG, setting for according to the manufacturer.
But speak to Forbidden. I reckon they probably help you out. They're pretty kind of rider-based.
That's where you start, and then it's there's nothing wrong with it's everyone's different, like we said. But I think it helps you find at least recommended air pressures and things. Yeah.
Shocks. SAG is pretty much the
just getting in the ballpark,
universal way.
I think
I don't know. I don't have too much else.
That's a pretty comprehensive answer. Sweet. Speak to Forbidden, but have an experiment. Go off base settings and don't be afraid to explore. I reckon that's it. Thank you very much for watching, listening, tuning in to another episode of the Pinkbike podcast. Thank you very much from Toby and I, and we will see you next week.